Honey. It's nature's oldest medicine. A liquid gold that survives for thousands of years without spoiling. You pay a premium for it because it's raw, organic, and unfiltered. You use it to heal your gut, soothe your throat, and avoid processed sugars. But as of 2026, there's a high probability that the honey in your pantry never saw the inside of a beehive. It didn't come from a meadow in South Dakota or a forest in Brazil. It came from a chemical reactor in an industrial park outside of Ningbo, China. Welcome to the era of Honeygate 2.0. In 2013, the U.S. saw the largest food fraud sting in history, but that was just the beta test. Today, fraudsters are using designer syrups, lab-engineered liquids specifically designed to pass the most advanced DNA and NMR tests. We aren't just talking about watered-down honey anymore. We're talking about a $15 billion global laundering scheme that is systematically bankrupting American beekeepers and replacing a medicinal superfood with a metabolic nightmare. To understand why your honey is a lie, we have to look at the math. Americans consume over 400 million pounds of honey every year. But U.S. beekeepers? They only produce about 150 million pounds. That 250 million pound gap is where the crime happens. Back in 2001, the U.S. government realized China was dumping honey, selling it below cost to kill the American industry. So, we slapped them with a 221% tariff. Overnight, Chinese honey became the most expensive in the world. But instead of stopping, the trade just went underground. The discovery of this fraud didn't happen in a lab. It happened at the docks. Investigators noticed something strange. Countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, and Thailand, places that historically had very few beehives, suddenly became the world's top honey exporters. It was a miracle of biology. Or, more accurately, a miracle of transshipment. They'd take Chinese honey, filter out every single grain of pollen, which is like the honey's GPS, and then blend it with a tiny bit of local honey to give it a fingerprint. By 2013, the DOJ's Honeygate sting caught companies like Honey Solutions and Grobe Farms in a scheme involving $180 million in evaded duties. But that was a decade ago. The fraudsters didn't quit. They just went to grad school. To understand how they're getting away with it in 2026, imagine you're a detective at a crime scene. In the old days, you'd look for physical fingerprints. In honey, those fingerprints are pollen. If the honey says clover, you should find clover pollen. Easy, right? But fraudsters started bleaching the honey, using ultrafiltration to remove the fingerprints entirely. So scientists leveled up to NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance testing. Think of NMR like a digital facial recognition system for molecules. Instead of looking for pollen, the machine looks at the vibe of the atoms. Every real honey has a specific resonance, a unique signature of amino acids and enzymes. But here's the 2026 twist. The fraudsters are now building custom syrups. They are literally reverse engineering the NMR results. They take rice, beet, and pea syrups and tune the molecular signature until the machine looks at a jar of fake syrup and says, "Yep, that's a human. That's a bee." In 2024, the UK Food Standards Agency found that 100% of the honey they tested from certain retailers showed signs of this molecular masking. And as we move through 2026, the U.S. Honey Authenticity Project is sounding the alarm. The lab-grown honey is winning. We've been told for decades that honey is the healthy sweetener. It has a lower glycemic index than white sugar, it's packed with antioxidants, and it contains trace amounts of local pollen that can help with seasonal allergies. But in 2026, the wellness community is facing a metabolic ghost. When you buy a jar of adulterated designer syrup, you aren't just getting sugar. you're getting a biological hollow shell. Most modern honey fraud involves C3 and C4 plant syrups, derived from rice, corn, or sugar beets. On paper, they look like honey, but in your body, they act like a metabolic grenade. Pure honey contains proline, an amino acid essential for collagen production and gut health. Fake honey? It's almost entirely devoid of it. When you replace the complex enzymes of a bee with the industrial enzymes used to break down rice starch, your liver doesn't recognize the fuel. Studies in 2025 and 2026 have linked these adulterated syrups to increased levels of blood lipids and abdominal weight gain. Because these syrups are often refined using harsh chemicals and ion exchange resins, they can also carry trace amounts of heavy metals like arsenic, lead, and aluminum. You think you're healing your gut with a spoonful of honey in the morning. In reality, you might be microdosing industrial contaminants that the FDA's overstretched testing facilities simply aren't catching. And for the allergy crowd? If your honey has been ultra-filtered to hide its Chinese origin, it contains 0 pollen. It is biologically dead. You are paying $15 a jar for what is essentially high-fructose corn syrup with better branding. Now, before we burn down the honey aisle, let's look at the other side. Industry giants will tell you that ultrafiltration isn't a crime, it's a feature. Let's steelman their argument for a moment. Large-scale packers argue that American consumers hate one thing more than anything else: crystallization. Natural, raw honey turns hard and gritty over time. It's a sign of purity, but to a grocery store manager, it looks like a spoiled product. To prevent this, companies use high-pressure filtration. They'll tell you, we have to remove the pollen because pollen acts as a seed for crystals. If we don't filter it, the honey won't stay liquid on the shelf for a year. We aren't hiding the origin. We're just ensuring a smooth, clear, premium look that the market demands. They argue that standardized, filtered honey is safer and more consistent for the massive food service chains that need 500-gallon drums of the stuff to stay liquid in a warehouse. It's a convenient excuse, because while they standardize the look, they are simultaneously standardizing the death of the American bee. In 2026, U.S. beekeepers are facing a pincer movement. On one side, they have the varroa mite and climate-driven colony collapse. On the other, they have the dump. When a lab in China can produce a ton of rice honey for $500, but it costs a Montana beekeeper $2,000 in labor and fuel to produce the real thing, the market breaks. Our beekeepers aren't just honey makers. They are the infrastructure for our entire food system. They pollinate the almonds in California, the apples in Washington, and the berries in Maine. By choosing the clear, stable syrup over the cloudy, raw, local honey, we are inadvertently defunding the very insects that keep our grocery stores full. We are trading our long-term food security for a slightly more convenient squeeze bottle. In 2026, you can't rely on the word natural. You need to look for the receipts. Because while some brands are fighting to save the bees, others are just fighting to save their margins. Let's look at who is actually passing the 2026 authenticity audits. First, the brands to treat with extreme caution. We aren't necessarily saying every jar is fake, but in 2026, these are the categories failing independent lab tests at the highest rates. 1. The generic store brand trap. Be wary of generic Clover honey from budget retailers that list multiple countries of origin like product of Vietnam, Argentina, and Ukraine. These massive blends are the primary vehicle for honey laundering. They are chemically standardized to look the same, but the molecular profile is often a mess of rice and beet syrups. 2. Non-certified, imported Manuka. Manuka is the most faked honey on earth. If you see a Manuka bottle for $10 at a discount store without a UMF, unique Manuka factor, or MGO rating, and a New Zealand origin seal, Put it back. You're likely buying flavored corn syrup. 3. The ultra-clear squeeze bottles. If the honey looks like a perfectly clear amber LED light and costs less than 50 cents an ounce, it's a red flag. Real honey has tiny imperfections. Perfection in honey is a sign of overprocessing. If you want the medicinal benefits we talked about, these brands have consistently passed the 2026 True Source and NMR protocols. Nature Nates, raw and unfiltered. One of the largest in the US that actually maintains a strict testing regime. They specialize in keeping the pollen in, which is the ID card of the honey. Local Hive Honey. This brand is a favorite for 2026. They don't blend global honey. They partner with local American beekeepers. You can literally see which region your honey came from on the label, for example, Southeast or Rocky Mountain. Bee Made, a massive cooperative where the beekeepers actually own the company. They were the first to go True Source certified, meaning every drop is traceable back to a specific hive. Zach and Zoe Sweet Bee Farm, a smaller, family-run operation that has become a gold standard for purity. Their wildflower honey is raw, unfiltered, and packed with the enzymes your gut actually needs. Costco's Kirkland Signature, with the seal. Surprisingly, Costco has used its massive leverage to force transparency. Look for the True Source certified logo on their 100% US raw honey jars. Avoid their generic honey blends without the seal. So, how do you protect yourself without a $50,000 NMR machine in your kitchen? You use the 2026 Purity Protocol. The Thumb Test. Drop a bit of honey on your thumb. Does it spread and run off like water? It's likely syrup. Pure honey is high density. It should stay in a thick, cohesive glob. The Water Test. Drop a spoonful into a glass of water. Fake honey starts dissolving immediately, clouding the water. Real honey is stubborn. It will sink to the bottom as a solid lump and stay there until you stir it. The crystallization rule. If your honey hasn't turned cloudy or hard after 6 months in the pantry, it's probably not real honey. Crystallization is the blue checkmark of the bee world. Embrace the crunch. The ultimate test is in your kitchen. Real honey is stubborn. If you drop a spoonful into water and it stays in a solid lump at the bottom, it's real. If it starts dissolving and clouding the water immediately, that's the designer syrup we talked about. We are losing our beekeepers to a lab-grown lie. By choosing the cloudy, raw, and local jar over the cheap, clear one, you aren't just protecting your health. You're protecting the infrastructure of our entire food system. Check your pantry. Does your honey have the True Source seal? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to see us expose the chocolate cartel next, hit that subscribe button. This is Grocery Uncovered.